Right, we're going to talk about AI. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's this new thing. It's sort of, I mean, everyone's talking about it for the right reasons. It is out there and it is everywhere. But this morning here is about emerging markets. With this great panel, I want to sort of dig into the good and the bad, the pros and the cons. It's not all upside, and I like to focus on the downside as well. So with your expertise, I really want to dig into the challenges for emerging markets, the opportunities for emerging markets, and what's it going to take to make sure, basically, that on balance, the good outweighs the bad. The good outweighs the bad. So Harrison, maybe I can start with you. I mean, let's start on the positive side, the opportunities. AI and emerging markets, what are the areas you'd look at? Maybe it's sectors, maybe it's products, maybe it's people in society, but what areas would you look at immediately or in the short term that present the best opportunities for emerging markets when it comes to AI and innovation?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. And as you rightly said, AI has been the talk of the town, talk of the world in the last year. And I think in our perspective, the notion on AI is great, particularly in the emerging market, but there's also a broader, let's call it technology ecosystem that needs to be there in order for AI to work. And what I mean by that is, first of all, we at EN run the critical infrastructure, the network connectivity in many markets. This ranges from the mobile networks as well as the fixed network infrastructure. Secondly, there's a number of digital services that ride on top of these networks, whether it's financial services or mobile financial services, telehealth, digital education, and things like that. And then thirdly, which is then where AI come into place, is how do you then leverage AI and the various algorithms that can sort of further optimize these digital services. For example, providing the next best product offer for a general consumer. For example, really providing a tailored education plan for a particular student body. So I think they all need to come into play in order to make this to work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And welcome, Blaise. Really great to have you here. Thanks so much. I'll come to you in a moment. Sachin, can I ask you, and my notes here say you're Chief Wizard. I must say that's one of the best titles I've ever seen in my career. So it's great to be talking with the Chief Wizard. Where do you see the opportunities? Before we get to the challenges, but the opportunities for AI in emerging markets.
So, I think principally you have to look at November 22 was a huge evolution in user interface design. More than an evolution in AI. It was a first-time technology that, LLMs, what used to be called computational conversation in the 1930s. In the 1960s, you started to get sort of the first transformers. BERT was 7-8 years ago. So this is not new stuff. What you started to see was you moved away from tools and canvases and you made something that felt like what's up. The conversation, whether it was intended or unintended, was slow. And I often say this, growing up, my English teacher used to say to me, Sachin, count to 3 before you reply. People think you've heard them and your answer will be more authentic. Well, this thing is writing quite slowly, right? As opposed to what Google search would do, which is an instant, 100 responses. And then we changed the vernacular. So we went from things that, it's actually a confabulation. It's not a hallucination. A hallucination is a human emotion or phenomena. And so how does that tie into emerging? Well, you suddenly saw everyone both panic, get excited, and it was like a conversation on the tube that people were having. I've never seen a piece of technology have a conversation on the tube. Probably the last time was the iPhone. And so what does that mean from an emerging markets perspective? It means that customers have very clearly said, users have very clearly said, conversation is their preferred user interface.
Right.
Not all the tools and forms and wizards that we've built. I think the second thing that we're seeing on the emerging market side is it's suddenly leveling the playing field of whatever distortion there was, whether it was an education distortion, whether it was a means distortion. The real sort of underlying message is AI is a cape that you put on a human being to give them superpowers. But I think there's a second piece to that, which is imagine you had a really good seller. and they do really well. They hit their quotas,
Right.
and they sell. And everyone else in the company is like a not so bad seller.
Yeah.
But now with AI, you can take that really good seller, take the traits out, and make everyone a great seller. So that's great for the business.
Right.
But it opens a really important point. Whose IP is it to be a good seller? Is it the company's IP? Is it the individual's IP? And you just remove this individual's advantage.
Right.
And again, emerging markets piece here, you see a lot of that, whether it's development, marketing services, content. And so this means the entire education framework needs to change, and the emerging markets are ripe to change it.
Fascinating.
And sorry, you had mentioned sort of leveling the playing field. In fact, I think it goes farther beyond that. It actually leapfrogs any existing or legacy infrastructure. Because if you think about it, the traditional model, and I think you use the education example, is, we don't have access to education. We need to build schools and have the CapEx and investment needed. We need to hire the teachers for the community. With technology, with AI, you actually don't need any of that. As long as you have the connectivity, you can bring the best in the world professors and teachers to the fingertips of students who don't have it. You can use AI to customize any curriculum or learning plan for that particular student, almost like a segment to one. If there's a certain learning disability, if there's a certain subject that this individual is interested in, right? And you can use immersive technologies like AR and VR to really feel the realness of dissecting a frog. In fact, we were actually in the Silicon Valley 2 weeks ago talking to some of the technology players, and how do we really bring these sort of technologies to the markets we operate in.
And I think that's
Just quickly, then I'll bring you in, Blaze. Go on.
I was going to say, and I think it's also, whether you think of it from an education perspective, or you think of it from, 90% of emerging market economies are small businesses.
Right.
They're digitally disconnected today. We work with Ian, for example, in the region. We work with others around. And a part of it is that every small business, mom-pop shop in emerging markets is saying, I need to be digitally native.
Yeah.
But they're not going to go hire a team of developers and figure stuff out. And so they need to be able to make this transformation almost like they switch on electricity.
Right. Wonderful. Blaze, welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, as you can see, there's a lot of energy here, a lot of positivity here, which is great.
Yes.
Before we get to the challenges, before we get to the barriers, emerging markets, AI, where are the biggest and best opportunities?
Sure. Well, a couple of thoughts that my colleagues haven't already pointed out. I agree with everything you both have said that I've heard. Maybe you said all the stuff I didn't agree with before I arrived. But the other things that I would say beyond business opportunities or apps is that AI is really about the ability to understand complex systems, to model complex systems. This is why I think some of the biggest breakthroughs over the next century are going to be in biology, in sociology and health, in agriculture. These are areas where a lot of the 20th century development and the development so far has really been focused on, to focus on agriculture for a moment, because this is obviously the key defining factor of emerging economies.
Absolutely. Blaze, so now let's just switch that a little bit. What's it going to take? I mean, that sounds amazing. I can't wait. But from an emerging market perspective, the mum and pop stores, what's it going to take to help them even get close to some of those great opportunities and outcomes?
Well, if you think about all of the kinds of skills that polycropping has brought to agriculture, in which you have mixtures of different kinds of crops or plants that reinforce each other, that provide natural pest control, that enrich the soil. This is a very different mode of agriculture from the one in which Monsanto or Cargill comes by and sort of formats the land, right, with a single crop, and you dump massive amounts of pesticides and fertilizers and so on. Yeah. So to me, the idea that we can go beyond just sort of maximizing yield with maximal inputs and toward regenerative agriculture that allows small plots to yield very high yields of very high quality foods that regenerate soil. I think this is one of the biggest things. I know that we're talking about a lot of entrepreneurial stuff, but for me, we're kind of on spaceship Earth here. There is one resource that is really not exponential, right? It's the land, and the land is what really makes the living for all cultures, for all societies on Earth that haven't sort of migrated into the ethosphere of being pure information technology.
Absolutely. And Blaise, just sticking with you for a moment, we're at the World Government Summit. What's the government's role in emerging markets to facilitate that?
That's a great question. So I think that there's been a sort of a race to regulate AI. And
is that a good race? Are people running in the right direction?
Not necessarily. I think that in many ways the lack of consultation on the part of regulators with people who understand the technology is an impediment to making rules that both are going to protect people and are going to encourage the kind of growth and the kind of development that AI can bring.
Blaise, this is a great point. I won't mention the country, but I offended someone yesterday who was a public official from a certain country who shall remain nameless. I apologise to that individual. But I said, basically, that I worry that regulators can't keep up.
Well, I mean,
Am I wrong?
Yeah, we have never seen an industry or a technology that has so much information asymmetry. You know, you look at the prison service, for example, the CEOs, the government, the policymakers, you have far less than one standard deviation between their level of understanding.
Because also, like money, like if I'm young, I'm not young, but if I want money, why would I go work? I mean, I respect governments, I respect them, but why would I go work for a government when I can work for a private sector and earn more money?
That's not true.
It depends on the government.
It's just me. That might be just me.
Depends on the government.
But what I'm saying is, I worry about the talent going to the cool private sector.
But I think you made a leaping assumption that everybody just works for money.
No, I know. That's me. All right. But still.
But there's no but still, right? I think some people are doing it for public service, but I also think from a government perspective, the private-public partnership in this case is very important. You know, we're entering a world where, for example, STEM in education is over. If kids are coding in 10 years, we have basically shot ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
Right? If the only thing that they're focused on is math and science, we have shot ourselves in the foot. We are entering the era of the polymath. Yeah. We need people that study the arts. We need people that do music. We need people that still do sciences. And it's like Da Vinci all over again. And it's so unique to this era. I'd say the second thing, which, you know, I'll give you an example. We talk about large language models because they speak English. But actually, large language models are very good at speaking DNA. Right. We don't understand DNA. We can't read it ourselves, so we have no proxy of comparison. So if you're going to deliver healthcare at volume in the emerging markets, and you're going to sit, you know, in a closed room and not speak to people and not understand, you're not going to understand what the technology's impact is.
And by the way, the point you made about coding, I actually think is fascinating.
What, that we won't need?
That we won't need coding. Because if you think about it, as little as 18 to 24 months ago, coding, computer science, and I'm a computer engineer by trade, was the rage of the town.
You got to go do it.
Everyone needs to go do it. You know, software will eat the world, and that's been around for many years.
I was going to go do a MOOC online just so I could be part of the party and have fun, but now I'm glad I didn't.
But now, right, we heard on the stage, I think Jensen Huang on the first day basically said coding, because of ChatGPT, some of these AI solutions, is fully democratized, and you actually don't need to use it. Right, and don't need to do it. And where the next sort of critical path is actually about biomedical and the human genome, because we're such complex ecosystem. And you see that transition in just a matter of 18 months. I think it's, you know, first of all, fascinating. But that being said, to me, it's not just about not needing coding. It's actually about having the creativity to think about the solutions, right? I think the point raised on stage the other day was domain knowledge. Understanding key business processes. What are the challenges that you want to solve, as well as the critical thinking to get there?
I agree, but a couple of points. First of all, you know, the focus on, you know, some magic skill. Everybody needs to learn Python now because, you know, Python is the thing. Of course, Python won't be the thing in a few years' time. Of course, models will be able to generate code and translate right from intent to code. Good. However, the idea that now becomes unimportant to our education, I think, is wrong. You know, there's a basic level of literacy and ability to think that comes from math, from physics, from having learned how to program in whatever language, from having learned literature, right? These are all things, how to read, how to write. These are fundamental skills that I don't think are going out of style just because we have models that can freely translate among those modalities.
But I don't think it's about going out of style. I think it's, today we're used to, like my friends sort of growing up, when I see my cousins in India, it'd be like, I'm going to do commerce, I'm going to do science, I'm going to do one straight line. And there was no cross-pollination. I grew up in the UK, and so at GCSEs, I did art, I did design, I did music, I did math. Like, it was completely different. And I think the point is, we're moving to a world, to your point of personalization, we're moving to a world where it will be cross-discipline, because that's what you'll need to be in the workplace, as opposed, if you're a brilliant mathematician, you will always have a space. It's like I always argue, right? Before people used to draw pictures, then the camera, paintings, then the camera came along. We still have people that do portraits, but now everybody's not doing portraits.
So let's dig into this a little bit and think about emerging markets. But to share context from an economist perspective, when we talk about AI, we talk about, is it going to create jobs, destroy jobs, or end up somewhere in the middle? And the key for me, when we're thinking about education, development, training, is can we work with AI to help it augment us or replace us? And there's a difference. You either replace me and get rid of me and I'm not here anymore, or you augment whatever skills I have. So this cross-collaboration selling is really interesting. How do we do that? Like, how do we do that? And particularly for emerging markets. So you still got to have great knowledge in these certain areas and creativity in certain areas. I'm the least creative person on the planet, so that's good news for everyone else. But how do we help create a system where AI augments us as human beings, and whether it's India or the UAE or another emerging market, they can benefit from that. But how do we create that augmentation? I'm really interested in.
Well, I think it's a framing problem, right? Because the minute you say replace, it means it replaces all of you. But actually, I'd argue it replaces just some of your skills. And I don't see why that's a bad thing, because
I don't have many. This is a real worry for me, to be honest.
If you remember in the steam revolution, and then you went to the sort of industrial revolution, everybody really worried, oh my God, what are the kids going to do? Because they were working in these factories with steam engines. Well, because electricity is going to, well, they went to school. I think the second thing to keep in mind is, if you took an aggregate view of the top 10 skills in the world, you aggregated the demand and you aggregated the supply, I'd say demand outweighs supply by sort of 8 to 1. So we don't have enough people to do all the things we want anyway.
Right.
And then the thing that really winds me up, whether it's generative AI or human generated, is we do the same stuff en masse, in repeat, and it's just asinine. So I give you an example, in our own little example, we asked 1.9 million questions from our customers last year. Guess how many were unique? 1,200. And so I was like, well, we could have just asked 1,200. We asked the same question in so many different ways, and it's 1.9 million. And actually, when you go across any task that human beings are doing, and you do it at a high level, you will, it's a formula called it's an algorithm called MapReduce. You can MapReduce everything down to like 1:100.
Yep.
If not more. And that's the key. So we can suddenly start to create balance between supply and demand.
Harrison.
No, I think this is first of all, a really interesting point, because if I think about it, AI is sort of like the third horizon technology that will fundamentally change the world. Going from sort of the Industrial Revolution to the internet and now to AI. And maybe to your point, it's not really about replacing, because I think a whole slew of economy and this whole slew of jobs and things like that will open up that we probably even today don't even know about, because we're all sort of figuring it out as we go. And I think, at least for someone like myself, the devil's in the details. Because you talk about, is it replacing me? Is it augmenting me? I would also think about, on a day-to-day basis, if I have 10 hours in a day spending at work, or 12 hours a day, where do I spend my time? If it's about spending 2 hours a day on emailing my colleagues on different documents, a lot of that can be automated. A lot of that can be, using AI, be facilitated. If it's about approving certain budget or approvals, so as long as within a threshold, right, an invoice or consultant, that can all be done. Do I want to automate me sitting in a board meeting, talking to a CEO of a company? Probably not. Do I want to automate myself sitting with a government official, talking about business? Probably not. Maybe, right? Depending on who. So I think the devil's in the details in terms of where I spend my time, where I spend my day, where I can add the most value, and where things can actually be offloaded off of my plate.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. When
I think,
you think about,
if I may.
Jump in, Blaise. Come back. Go, Blaise.
I think that the book that Brian Merchant recently wrote, Blood in the Machine, which is a history of Luddism in the 19th century. It's actually kind of required reading on this topic. And one of the things that he points out is that the Luddites were not anti-machine. They were actually not only users of machines and developers of machines and the developers of a lot of those technologies behind the Industrial Revolution. Their fight was really about workplace conditions. We have the counterexample of what happened during the Great Compression in the US in the 1950s, 1960s, in which automation went alongside a great rise in the middle class. That was a great example of labor and machinery sort of really working in concert. So there's nothing deterministic about technology being labor replacing or being anti-labor, pro-capital. I think you were asking earlier about roles of governments. Governments have control over a lot of the levers that make these disruptive technologies either be good for a lot of people or only be good for a few people.
But Blaise, if I take your point, which I think is absolutely fascinating, you're essentially saying that if governments can bring people along,
right,
be inclusive in this journey of these amazing technologies, then I think, and maybe are you saying that the outcomes will be better, right?
Yeah, I mean, an AI technology or any technology is only going to be adopted if it's generating wealth.
Yeah.
If it's generating wealth, there is no reason that everybody can't gain.
Yeah.
And I think you have sort of, with the use of the technology, especially in emerging markets, right? If you think about this, what does it do really well? It removes human variability. So imagine a call center. Average call centers have an NPS of like 15 or 20 if it's really good. You should be at like 50. And the reason is you put an agent, they get some training, and they're never as good as the best agent. Now you have AI that powers the conversation, says you should ask this, the customer really wants to ask this is the right response. Now every call center experience feels like a really nice experience. And now you would argue, well, hang on a second, that's replacing jobs. I'd argue, no, it's enhancing the individual's ability to do a lot more with a lot less training, and therefore, cuts costs and improves sort of efficacy. I think the second thing when you think about from a risk perspective is, unfortunately, most of the world, and this is why I love the UAE, most of the world are elected officials. So at some point during their tenure, they shift focus to how do I get re-elected. Suddenly the bias shifts from the success of the country and the people and the citizens to their own success. The UAE doesn't have that problem. And so you're seeing people take a 10-year view, a 20-year view, and actually start to build the right dimensions about the future of education, what will regulation look like, and that really game changes things.
So if I extrapolate that point for democracies in emerging markets, you're saying, we understand your democratic challenges, but longevity of frameworks, longevity of regulations is really important for people to understand the direction of where you're going.
100%. I think in the UK it might be the first time ever you have a centrist left and a centrist right party, and there might be some handover. But our politicians do a fabulous job of trying to tell you something for 20 years, and then they shapeshift after 3 years because now they're basically fighting to get re-elected, and then the whole program went out the window.
I think, at least from my side, I'll sort of park the political affiliation aside for a second. But to me, the role of government is huge in this space. Because to me, the government is sort of the single connected thread that can tie all this together. No one entity, I'm talking about, companies, organizations can actually do that, right? And if you have a really forward-looking government, such as that in the UAE here, you can really build that vision and march the entire ecosystem 100%. Around it. In fact, as you know, the UAE is, I think, the first government with a minister of AI, with a minister of cybersecurity, and all these different new and emerging technologies that I think people don't even think about. And now, and this has been, I think, 7 or 8 years that this has been in place. And now, in a way, building that ecosystem of digital government services. I'm relatively new in living in the UAE, and we have this thing called the UAE Pass. It's a single sign-on to a bunch of government services, from paying my tolls to paying my electrical bill. And you can only do that if you have that mindset and the will to invest it, as well as, of course, the underlying data infrastructure to sort of connect the dots from a tech stack perspective.
That idea of government working with technology to make life better for citizens. I mean, Estonia has done it. I've seen it here in UAE in an amazing way. These kind of government-private partnerships to make one-stop services. This is really cool. and I think it's frankly lacking in the U.S. And there is of course a digital gov effort, but I think it's been underinvested relative to what's been done here. So that's very, very fruitful. The other point about both agility and longevity of regulation, and also I would say harmonization of regulation worldwide, these are really important as well. If you're a big company like Google, you can probably afford enough lawyers and so on to work out how to operate in various different kinds of markets. If you're a small entrepreneur, an all-digital entrepreneur trying to do business worldwide, you don't have those kind of resources, and the benefits of harmonization are really highest, I think, for the smallest companies. Also, I think that if governments really focus on why as opposed to how, meaning, what are the things that need to be protected? What are the conditions that are going to lead to thriving, as opposed to the specifics of how those things are implemented? Those kinds of laws have more longevity than the hows, because the hows change all the time.
I actually think we need
last point.
We need why, we need what, and we need the how to tie it all together.
Absolutely. But listen, I think this is absolutely fascinating discussion, and again, from the Economist Group, the newspaper will make the argument about small government, limited government, and so on, but what we sort of hear here is that active government plays a real role. So I think getting the balance right, we need to discuss this for a long time, but unfortunately we've run out of time. So please join me in thanking the gentlemen, Sachin, Harrison, and Blaise, for a great discussion.